Hey guys, it's Ben here from Wrestling Life, and as you'll know, if you follow the channel, this is a bit of a departure from me. It's never usually videos of just me. It's usually all about my guests. But I wanted to do something a bit different today. This has got none of the wonderful production values that the show usually has. This is raw. This is as raw as it gets. But last night I watched the first two episodes of Mr. McMahon on Netflix, and before I look at what the internet has to say about it, before I read hundreds of comments and see how everyone's reacted to it, I just wanted to capture my reaction. And my reaction is underwhelmed. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know what I expected. After all the hype, after all the talk, after all the speculation, um, I guess I just expected a whole lot more. Now, I'll be honest, I've obviously only watched the first two episodes. I went into this last night thinking I could binge the whole thing. My wife even sat with me, as any of you who listen or watch the show will know. My wife detests wrestling. She is not a fan. She doesn't want to hear about it. She doesn't want to know about it. But the Mr. McMahon character fascinates her. Obviously, she's heard so much from me over the years about him. She hasn't really been able to avoid it for almost 20 years of marriage. So we got a takeaway. We watched it, and you know, it was interesting to see it through her eyes because actually, she found the first episode really interesting. All of the breakdown of the territory system, the talk about Vince buying the company from his dad, and the challenges that they went through, and Vince's upbringing, and how he broke the taboo of going national with the product. She found it really interesting, and that's great because perhaps that's the entire purpose of the show. Perhaps the purpose of the show is to introduce a new audience to wrestling before January, which makes a lot of sense. But for any of us that spend any time reading wrestling news, absorbed in the culture, reading magazines, listening to shows, listening to podcasts, watching shows like this, there was no new ground broken in that first episode, or indeed the second. There was nothing in 2 hours of documentary that I didn't already know, and I'm sure all of you didn't already know. There were no surprises. There were continuity gaps in the timeline and things that I was expecting to see that I didn't see, particularly around 1992. Um, there was a lot of Hogan, which isn't a surprise. I think, Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon were so synonymous that obviously that had to be captured and that had to be talked about. But at times it was feeling, is this a Mr. McMahon documentary or is this a history of sports entertainment documentary? And those are very two different things. Those should be presented as two very different things. The trailer certainly marketed this, as trailers often do, as something very different to what those first two episodes offered. And, it's obviously been promoted in a very salacious way, as Netflix is wont to do. We're all waiting, obviously, for how everything else will be covered. And I'm sure it's all to come. This is obviously the first documentary, with WWE names attributed to it, where it's covering the Benoit tragedy. It's going to cover, obviously, the events of 2022 to 2024. We know that from the introduction. And I'm sure it'll be interesting. But based on what I've seen over the last two episodes, I don't think it's going to say anything that any of us already know. And so it just kind of calls into question a bit for me, really. I mean, I just feel a little bit like, why? And like, the PR man in me gets it completely. Those of you who kind of follow my two dual careers will know that, as well as being a wrestling fan for 35 years, I've worked in public relations and marketing for 20, and I run a PR agency, and a big part of my life is telling the stories of purpose-driven businesses and individuals. So from that perspective, yeah, I get it completely. Netflix, January, Netflix has become a huge corporate partner to WWE. Netflix has a vested interest in bringing as many eyeballs to that product from day one. There are a lot of people who are either lapsed wrestling fans from the 80s or the late 90s who haven't seen the product in 20 years who need to be brought up to speed. I get that completely. And I'm sure this documentary will still do a sterling job of showing you how much the company has changed, how different people are in charge, and now how it's a very different product to the Vince McMahon, Mr. McMahon era. And that's all very well and good, but it does also leave that question a little bit as to the why beyond that. As in, is this whole documentary being produced in an era now to literally wipe the slate clean? Is this literally an exercise in PR to be like, that was the old, this is the new? And if so, I get it, but I don't think it's going to necessarily do what it needed to do for the wrestling audience like us who are expecting that little bit more. I'd have been really interested to see in those first 2 episodes much more of a family insight. We saw a little bit of Linda, we saw a bit of Shane, we saw a bit of Stephanie, but very, very much felt like they were towing the family line. I'd have been fascinated to really hear about the pressures that put under that young family in the early 90s through the steroid trial. I'd have loved to hear a bit more from Linda and a bit more from Stephanie and Shane about actually what that did to their family, the pressure they faced. We heard a little bit about the financial pressures leading into WrestleMania, but nothing, again, that really got you inside the heart of the McMahon family. And for me, that would have really separated this documentary. I mean, obviously, it's full of the expert talking heads you would expect, the David Shoemakers and the Dave Meltzers of this world. You would expect a lot of that insight for a documentary. That's fine. A lot of Tony Atlas, didn't see that coming. I said to my wife, you just wait until you hear this guy's laugh. And we got there eventually and it didn't disappoint. But, very, very, it's like Tony Atlas was really the only voice from that era, that fresh voice that we were getting. And, even what we've seen of I'm wearing his hoodie today, Bret Hart. Obviously anyone who listens to me knows I'm a Bret Hart guy. I'm sure it's going to get more interesting as we go into Montreal and the Monday Night Wars. But what we heard from Bret so far didn't really add anything to the conversation that we haven't already heard. So I just kind of come out of it. And obviously I'm prefacing this by saying I've only watched 2 of the 6. Maybe I'll turn it around and maybe you'll get another video from me at the end of this where I say, okay, I hold my hands up. It was great. You just needed those first 2 episodes to lay the foundation. But this viewer from the UK so far has one pretty happy wife, has a very enjoyable takeaway and a very nice beer as part of that experience last night. So, it wasn't wasted time. We had 2 good hours last night. We watched wrestling together, which never happens, and it opened up some conversations. But I'm hoping for more, and so far, I'm pretty underwhelmed, and it's not quite what I was expecting. But we'll see. And the one thing we know in wrestling is you always have to expect the unexpected. So maybe I'll be delighted and surprised. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on Mr. McMahon. Love to hear what you guys think. Do leave some comments. Let me know. Let's keep this conversation going. And if you haven't checked out the show yet, I really hope you can. This show is all about real talk from real talent. I'm trying to do something a bit different here. I'm trying to curb the negativity of the wrestling business. And I want to really showcase the real life stories behind the wrestlers, their families, the sacrifices of being on the road and what we've learned along the way. I've been really blessed with some conversations really from the likes of, Mick Foley and Eric Bischoff have both left their time to the show recently. Paige Collette, beautiful conversations just come out today talking about her journey with CPRS and going through her struggles of being in a wheelchair and fighting back. Some really big names coming up. But I really need you guys to help the show to grow. I'm a small content creator in the UK, learning as I go, but with a real heart and passion for wrestling. So if you can, please hit the subscribe button, check us out as a podcast, and just show your love and support. This is Wrestling Life with Ben Veal, real talk from real talent, and I'll see you soon. Bye.